The fastest alternating arm stroke in swimming. It's breast. Stop. It's not breaststroke. It's what? It's front crawl. Oh yeah, that makes more sense. It's front crawl's arm pull. There are two things that make this the fastest arm pull in swimming. The first is that it uses some of your strongest muscles whilst pulling. Your pectorals, chest muscles, latissimus dorsi, upper back muscles, and biceps, to name a few. The second is that the arm pull is alternating, which means that you constantly have propulsion throughout the stroke. In this video we will only be going through the basics of the front crawl arm pull. The advanced methods of the recovery and the underwater phase will be covered in later videos. As mentioned before, there are two phases of the pull, the underwater phase and the recovery phase. To perform the underwater phase of the pull, you will start with your arm extended in the water with your hand flat. You will then need to pitch your hand downwards slightly to initiate the pull. This is so that you have the surface area of your palm to generate power whilst pulling back. Next is to actually pull. When pulling, bend your elbow so that you engage your powerful muscles. Make sure that you keep your elbow high in the water but not protruding out of the water. The height of your arm in the water will depend on your anatomy. Longer arms will mean a deeper pull, unless you have very good flexibility in your wrist. You will also need to make a slight S shape when pulling through the water. Encourage children to do this by getting them to pretend that their arm is a snake. When performing the S shape, start with the out sweep with both left and right arms, obviously one then the other. Still ensure that your palm is facing slightly backwards so that you keep accelerating through the water. We use the out sweep in swimming to catch the water with your hand. Then to counter this out sweep, you will need to perform a slight in sweep so that when your hand pushes backwards, it will push closely past your hip. An easy way to think about this motion is to think about pulling along a rope. If you can in your pull, and if there is a lame rope, you can try and pull on that lame rope with your hand at the top of the rope, then just pull backwards towards your hip. Just make sure those lifeguards don't see you. When pulling along the rope, you will have to extend your arm, and this is the same in the water. In order to get any propulsion at the end of your stroke, you will have to push all the way through your stroke. The recovery phase is a little bit simpler. When coming over the water with your arm, lead from your elbow and relax the rest of your arm. It's called the recovery phase after all. When re-entering the water, engage your forearm again. Do this by extending your arm so that it is only slightly bent before entering the water. Then, enter the water with your middle finger first. We enter the water with your middle finger first now, just to avoid injury in your shoulder. Once your hand is then in the water, stretch your arm as far as possible to reset the arm pull. Then you carry on with the underwater phase. The easiest overall method in breaking down the front crawl arm pull is to perform the catch-up drill, mistakenly called ketchup drill by most kids. This is where only one arm will be moving at a time. The other arm will be extended in the streamlined position during this. Once the moving arm has touched the stationary arm, then the hands swap. You can think of it like playing tag with your hands. This drill will allow anyone's body to continuously be in streamline whilst accelerating, and also allows you just to concentrate on one arm at a time until you feel like you've become more advanced in your arm pull. If keeping your hand high in the water whilst doing the catch-up drill is too hard for you, then hold onto a board instead. Perform the same as you would do on the catch-up drill, but instead of touching hands, you're just going to touch the board to swap. A couple of things before we move on to the common faults though. Firstly, older adults and some people with certain disabilities may have restricted shoulder mobility. This will cause them to drag their arms over the top of the water. Obviously, this isn't ideal, so to help them with this, get them just to practice rolling their shoulders and their arms. Eventually, this should help loosen up their arms and allow them to perform more of an overwater recovery. There are, however, some cases where mobility cannot be adjusted, but this is very rare. Secondly, if you are teaching younger children where their arms are quite small, they will struggle to perform a relaxed overwater recovery. So with these children, it is best just to allow them to get their arms out of the water with a straighter arm recovery. This is just so that they can actually clear the water instead of dragging their arms over the water. As usual, we're going to go through some of the common faults and how to rectify them. Short arm syndrome. When starting out swimming, you may not realise that the longer you are in the water, the more efficient your stroke is. So if you or your pupil looks like Donkey Kong throwing barrels, then you may want to consider this drill. This is a variation on the catch-up drill where one hand touches the other. In this drill, you will have one arm extended out in front of you and high in the water. With your other arm, perform the front crawl arm movement. When the arm is recovering, keep it high, then enter with your middle finger first at your wrist. Then you will stroke past the lower hand with your hand that has just entered the water. With children, you can tell them to pretend that their lower hand is a cat or dog and that they have to stroke it. Once you have stretched as far as you can with your top hand, then start pulling with the other arm. If you are finding it hard to keep your arm high in the water whilst doing this, then hold on to a small board such as a pull buoy. Instead of stroking your top hand, stretch underneath the board with your moving hand whilst scraping it, then bring your hand back, grab onto the board and start pulling with the other hand. Not using the full range of your stroke. On most strokes, the main driving force of power comes from the final part of the pulling phase. This is when your arm has caught the water and you start to push with your hand as opposed to pulling. The way to teach a full range of movement is to have one arm extended forwards and the other arm extended backwards. When in this position, lean into the front arm so that your shoulders roll. Your back arm's shoulders should be slightly out of the water. This will then create the full extension for you. Do a length or a width, depending on how you're swimming in the pool, of this, with your head under the water all of the time, unless of course you need to breathe. Then on the next length, swap arms. Once you get the hang of holding this position whilst kicking, you're then going to move on to swapping arms so that it looks more and more like the front crawl stroke. Do this by performing 6 kicks in each position. Only start counting when you are fully extended and have rolled into the stroke. Then again, once you get the hang of this one, you are going to move down on the amount of kicks that you do per arm extension. For example, start with 6 kicks per arm, move to 4, then 2 kicks. Once you have got the hang of holding the position for a certain amount of kicks, try it without a pause. Because you were holding the position before, your arm should, hopefully, move as far back as possible through the propulsive phase. Low arm recovery. This is probably the most common fault, as people think that they need to lead from the hand rather than leading from their elbow. With the exception of older adults and younger children, this is how to learn or teach a higher recovery phase. Holding onto a board with one hand, preferably the hand needs to be at the top of the board. Have the other hand by your side and pretend that you are zipping up a dress along your ribcage up to your armpit and then slide back down to your side. You will know if you are leading from your hand or your elbow, because if you are leading from your hand, your elbow will droop and your wrist will be the highest point as you get up to your armpit. But if you are leading from your elbow will be the highest point. When you get used to leading from your elbow, you can start to engage your hand and push over and into the water, like so. When you feel comfortable on one arm, swap arms so that both arms look similar in the recovery phase. Couple this with the first drill and you should have an excellent recovery phase for your stroke. There are an abundance of drills that can be performed to focus on the front crawl arms. Here we have just gone through the basic ones, but in later videos we will go through more specific drills. If you want to keep up with the latest videos, click the logo here to subscribe. And if you have got any questions about what we have covered here, then the comments section is the place to go. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next one.